Sign up to The Economist for in-depth curated expert analysis of world events and topics ranging from business and culture to science and technology. You'll get the weekly digital edition, online-only articles, curated newsletters on politics, the markets, science, culture, and China, and full access to The Economist Podcast Plus. The Economist is independent journalism for independent thinking. Go to economist.com and get your first month free.
Today on CityCast Houston, it's been 1 week since a historic derecho, but could its impacts last months in downtown? Plus, what are Houstonians most concerned about in the city? We're diving into the annual Kinder Houston Area Survey to find out. And an important mental health response program is put on pause. Houston Landing's political reporter Paul Cobler joins me to recap a busy week of news in H-Town. Hey, before we get to today's conversation, I have a quick favor to ask. CityCast is doing our annual listener survey, and it would really help us out if you took it. I know a lot of y'all took it last year, and I'd be so grateful if you took it again because we can't use last year's data anymore. Please go to citycast.fm/survey to take the quick survey. It's about 7 minutes long. I timed it. It's easy. That's citycast.fm/survey. And when you take the survey, you'll be eligible to win a $250 Visa gift card plus some CityCast Houston swag. citycast.fm/survey. Take it right now. It's also in our show notes. It's Friday, May 24th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Hey, Paul, welcome back in. How are you?
Hey, Raheel, I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Everything good from the storm? How you doing?
I'm doing well. I have a lot less to complain about than most people. I actually had my window blown in by the storm, but I was able to mitigate the damage. I didn't lose power, which was kind of a miracle. And the window was replaced. So I have a lot less to complain about than most people, but it was dramatic for a few hours there.
Okay, Paul, we have a lot to get to, so we're going to start with our biggest story. Guess first. What do you got for me?
Yeah, so you brought a politics reporter onto your show. So, of course, I am here to talk about early voting for the May 28th primary runoff elections. This could also fall under most overlooked, but I'm putting it as our biggest story. But I think it's just something not a lot of people are thinking about. We got hit by this huge storm on Thursday. Early voting started on Monday and runs through Friday. So today is the last day, but there are still a lot of important elections. We live in this hyper-partisan state where, most of your races are decided in your primaries because it's going to be folks running for Congress, folks running for the legislature that aren't going to have a viable opponent in November. So pay attention to these races. If you care about who your elected officials are, you should be caring about early voting going on right now.
Yeah, today is the last day for early voting. But Paul, let's be honest. For the general election, I would really push early voting. Don't get stuck in long lines on election day. I feel like this one, there's going to be no lines on Tuesday, May 28th anyways, right? Come on, let's be honest.
I would say you're safe. You might risk a little more of a line, but I think the longest line you could probably face on election day is about 10 minutes from what I've seen in past elections. This is coming off our May 4th countywide elections for our appraisal districts that saw a turnout of 2.1% of registered voters of the 2.5 million registered voters in the county. So I am particularly disappointed in that most recent one and on a crusade to have really long lines on election day. So if it goes my way, I would still early vote because there will be lines on Tuesday.
What do you think? Is this going to be above that 2.1% or lower in terms of turnout?
It'll be above it. I think the appraisal district elections at the beginning of May were a particularly weird mix of this springtime election that we had never had before for these posts that no one had ever heard of and had never been elected before. Now we're kind of back to the bread and butter of election season in 2024. You have your primaries, you have your runoffs, you have your November general election, just like it is every 2 years. So I think we will see higher turnout, but I still don't think it will be particularly impressive, honestly.
All right. I'm going to get to my biggest story because this is one of the best things that happens every single year. The 43rd annual Kinder Houston Area Survey results are out, and this is a great chance for us to learn about what people are thinking around the city. So before we get to the results, I just want to lay out how many people were surveyed and used in the actual results. So it ended up being 5,356 Houstonians. 52% were female, 48% were male, 8% were Asian, 19% were Black, 42% were Hispanic, and 27% were white. And the average age of the person who actually took the survey ended up being 42 years old. So just laying out those numbers first, And here are some of the biggest takeaways. All right. First, let's start with crime. Crime was the biggest concern for responders, with 27% saying it was the most important. Housing affordability was second, and the economy was right behind, coming in at third. Now, traffic came in at number 4, but here's a little interesting thing on traffic. It was the biggest concern for responders in 2019, and it has been falling ever since. So there's a little correlation here with the pandemic starting a year later and people working from home and that traffic number dropping a little bit. But your initial thoughts on these big concerns?
That's what I was thinking as soon as you said the traffic thing is that's just probably that drop off is the percentage of people who are working from home now, because there is absolutely no way anybody who's regularly using Houston's roads does not see traffic as a priority. Yeah, I just find that really interesting. I mean, it reminds me a lot of the Houston Landing survey we did with the Kinder Institute last year. These priorities don't change a lot year to year, hearing affordable housing, hearing traffic. I just am kind of left thinking we have a lot of lingering issues in this city, economically and infrastructural, that folks have been trying to address for a long time. And I am curious what the path forward is going to be.
Okay, let's talk about the economy real quickly, because Houston's economy continues to leave many residents worried and behind, as nearly half are unable to come up with $400 to cover an unexpected emergency expense. And I talked about this last year when we talked about the survey. It is one of the most heartbreaking things to hear that half of the people surveyed don't have $400 to cover an unexpected emergency expense. Like, God, that makes no sense, because this economy should be working for us. The city should be providing so much for us, the opportunities where you should have just that much money saved up for an unexpected emergency expense.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking. I think it's just been so interesting being a political journalist. I pay a lot of attention to the national politics. I don't write about them, but, Joe Biden's economy is something that folks talk about all the time. And, the Biden administration likes to tout the number of jobs that they've added, likes to tout that inflation has fallen quite a bit since about a year and a half ago. I hear this on shows all the time, so now I get to repeat them and sound smart. But something is not lining up in the minds of Americans with our economy and what our elected leaders are trying to tell us. And I don't know what that discrepancy is, but most definitely people do not feel secure and aren't secure. I mean, when you hear you don't have $400 to cover an expense, that is not a safe position to be in economically for anybody. I would tell you, I wish we had an economist on the show. I could give you some better thoughts, but it's just heartbreaking, really.
It is. And if I hear the term soft landing one more time from the national political scene and economists, I will lose my mind.
Yeah, that's the issue with these soft landings is we've been talking about it for like 4 years. I feel like if we did the hard landing, we could have gotten this over within a couple months.
No shock here. Support for investment in education, Paul, has continued to increase. 70% of residents agreed schools needed more funding to provide a high quality education. And with so many ISDs facing a budget crisis, yes, we do need more funding, but where are we going to get it from? So that was interesting to see as well.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting to hear that's a priority for Houstonians. I mean, we've been talking a whole lot about education here, so maybe it's not a surprise, but where does that funding come from? Not from the state at this rate. The legislature is getting ready to meet at the beginning of next year, and vouchers are going to be a number one priority for Greg Abbott in the Republican-controlled legislature. He just flipped a bunch of legislative seats from Republicans that previously held them that were against vouchers, generally in rural areas of Texas where the public school system is very important. And he's flipped those seats and been able to get elected pro-voucher Republicans. And so this just kind of feels like now a sort of a foregone conclusion, something that we're going to be thinking about a lot. And within this debate last year, when the voucher push failed, that's the reason we really don't have funding for public education right now. That's the reason, HISD is struggling the way it has been for years. We are severely underfunded by the state, and then we also are severely underfunded by the property taxes we have from our local property tax cap. So, where does this money come from? I don't know, but it's certainly a priority for people in this city. So I think it's a conversation that we need to have as far as where those solutions can come from.
All right, I'm going to end on a positive note. Across every demographic and income level, Houstonians express more excitement than worry about the future. In fact, 72% were excited about their future in Houston, opposed to the 28% who were worried. So that is good to see that overall people are more excited about the future, but just some interesting data from the annual survey. I've linked the entire thing. Highly recommend people just going in, reading it. It's so easy to digest with all the numbers that are there. You would think it's not, but they do such a good job of recapping the whole thing, putting all the graphs up. So spend some time, read about it, learn a little bit more about what Houstonians are thinking.
Kinder Survey Day. It's a holiday in the city.
Yeah. Okay, Paul, let's get to our most overlooked story. I know it was a busy week in the news with storm coverage and with so much going on. So a lot of stories were overlooked. What do you got for me?
Yeah, so this is overlooked and not overlooked. Mayor John Whitmire unveiled his first budget as mayor of the city of Houston last week. And I don't think it was that overlooked. A lot of journalists just like me were looking at it. But I think the piece that has been overlooked by the public, especially within all of our distractions with the storm, is, this budget is touted as having no new taxes and fees, no new revenue streams, despite the city of Houston facing a massive, something like 200 million budget shortfall. So this is something we're going to have to address very soon. But John Whitmire has unveiled this budget that has no new taxes and fees. Kind of quietly underneath this message of no new taxes and fees but they're coming very, very soon. I think that's just something that Houston residents need to begin thinking about because it's coming, and I think nobody loves a new fee. Nobody loves a new tax, but that is the plan at this point in time from the reporting that I've been able to do. I'd say kind of in order of priority, this is really just kind of going off their comments and not a whole lot of detail behind it. But a garbage fee seems to be something that they're really looking at. So this would be like a separate utility fee. It's not a tax, but it's basically a tax, but you would just pay this on your water bill or something like that, some sort of set fee for your garbage collection that would go straight to the waste management department and would then allow the city to not have to use general fund money to fund our garbage collection. So we could save a bunch of money that way. The other ideas that has been floated was creating some sort of cost sharing partnership with our city utilities, like our water. So that could be something like the water company paying the city like 5% to use the right of way for the pipes that go underneath our roads. I mean, that could be a source of revenue that it was kind of floated last week. And then the final one would be, like I mentioned earlier, our local cap on property tax revenue. And so basically what that is there's already a state cap on the amount of money that the state and that municipalities are allowed to take every year from property owners. But in the city of Houston, we actually passed our own cap on local property taxes. This has basically prevented us from collecting something like $3 billion in taxes over the last 10 years, which is a pretty extraordinary amount of money, but just the local cap by itself. So this has been floated quite a bit in the election for the mayoral race. A lot of the candidates talked about it. John Whitmire kind of offered it sort of like, yeah, we'd look at it when we get in. They're talking about it still now that he's in office. So I think it's definitely something that he's looking for some support from council and from residents. All of these options are going to take a rollout. There's going to be conversations. There's going to be community meetings. There's a lot of choreographing that goes on in City Hall to kind of try to get the message right on these sort of things. So we'll certainly see it coming. We see it coming now. There will be a further rollout before the city is actually voting on this. So we will do our best to, keep everybody informed on when that's coming. But I think it's something that people should start really begin thinking about sending more money to your government because I think it's on the way.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be, right? We've heard from Chris Hollins about this, that, look, there's going to be a big budget crisis. We've heard from Mayor Whitmire, as you mentioned, when he unveiled the budget plan, but it just seems like we'll deal with it next year. Give us a little bit more time. We're kind of new here. Let us get acquainted, everybody. I know some people are kind of mad at us about tearing up some of the pedestrian projects. So we'll ease into this. And next year, when we roll out the fees, maybe you'll like us a little bit more. That's what it feels like.
I've been calling this a runway budget this year. It's kind of maintained the status quo from last year. They were able to take a bunch of money from our fund balance. We have a massive fund balance that was been built up over the last few years using federal money from the coronavirus relief bills. And so this kind of just like maintains the status quo. It's like we all know this issue is here. We were all talking about it, but really nothing is being done with an eye towards doing something next year. And part of kind of what you were saying there, the way the city pitches it, the way Whitmire is pitching it too, is that they're going to spend a lot of this year looking for efficiencies in city government. So basically like auditing departments, looking for places where money is not being spent like the most wisely, like you're paying two people to do basically the same job, you're using equipment that's shoddy and breaks down a lot and requires a lot of money repair, stuff like that. And so they're going to be looking for cost saving measures within the status quo that we have now as a way to kind of prove to the residents of Houston that they can be responsible with their tax dollars before they ask us to give them more.
Paul, quickly, I want to get your thoughts on Mayor Whitmire and Judge Hidalgo's press conference, because we talked about it on the show, but you covering the political scene as a political reporter, what did you think about that press conference and the tension that was there?
It's just there are occasionally moments as a reporter where I'm just kind of like cringing. I have a real issue with feeling embarrassed on behalf of people. So I was just watching that and I was like sinking into my chair and I was like, man, there is a disaster. I am not left taking a side for either of them. I just find all of it a little ridiculous and pretty funny. But I did want to note the addition to this in recent days, if you guys hadn't seen, John Whitmire, famed not hugger per the New York Times profile on Judge Hidalgo, hugged his former mayoral opponent, Sheila Jackson Lee, at a news conference. I was just stunned by it. I just thought it was so funny to me.
Yeah.
He's kind of handing them out. I think he's hugged Commissioner Leslie Briones in the last week as well. So at the Houston Atlanta, we've been just tracking the hugs while they work through their beef.
And for those of you who don't know, the story started during the Houston Marathon when Judge Hidalgo and Mayor Whitmire met each other. I believe that was like one of the first times in public.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of going for the hug, Mayor Whitmire kind of held Judge Hidalgo back and did the handshake instead. And there was a whole profile in the New York Times, as you mentioned, that in a professional setting, he just prefers a handshake. But now we're getting more hugs, but Judge Hidalgo hasn't received one.
We're on hug watch.
Yeah, I can't believe this is what the political scene has come to here.
We write about a lot of other stuff too, but we have to keep ourselves entertained. I hope everyone understands.
For sure. Paul, my most overlooked story, and this comes from the Houston Chronicle and Jen Rice, the future is uncertain for Harris County's initiative to send social workers rather than law enforcement to nonviolent 911 calls after members of Commissioner's Court clashed Wednesday over whether to continue making payments to the contractor that runs the program. There was a long debate. The court narrowly voted to withhold a $270,000 payment for work completed in February and March through the vendor DEMA Consulting and Management. Now, they are under investigation for allegedly double billing clients. This decision means that the program could just come to a halt, and that program is the Holistic Assistance Response Team, or HART. Now, since launching in 2022, HART teams have diverted over 11,000 calls from law enforcement response, instead dispatching mental health professionals and freeing up officers to focus on violent crimes. This is really hard to hear, and it's not them saying this program's not working. It's just the vendor might be up to something, and they are like, hey, pause the payments right now. That's what's happening. I hope they can figure this out because that is such an important program.
Yeah, it's a really stunning story. I believe they're under investigation in California. It was actually a local newspaper there about them overbilling a municipality there. And then the city looked into it and audited them and also found the same thing. And, I don't disagree with the idea that maybe we ought to pause things while we can run our own audit and look at it. This is a desperately needed program too. So it just sort of feels like a rock in the hard place. From what I understand is that the county has done some kind of preliminary looking and they don't at this point in time are saying they don't see anything wrong, at least in Harris County, with our program. So, fingers crossed that everything is fine. But yeah, I think it raises a lot of questions about this company that is our sole contractor for this very important program. And, what does it mean if they're doing this in other cities? Is that somebody that we can trust with this very important program? It's just kind of another one of those things in government that kind of makes you sad when you see people just sort of taking advantage of others and kind of disrupting things like this.
Okay, Paul, I usually don't do this on a Friday episode, but because so much has happened during the week and listeners might have missed some stories, we might have missed some stories, I'm going to do a little rapid fire here. We usually do that on Tuesday, but because I want to get through these stories, I'm going to take the next couple of minutes to rapid fire through some stories. So let's start with some storm-related stories. Downtown windows could take months to fix. Almost 4,000 windows were damaged, but it's not just as easy as replacing your window at home, right? This could take weeks just to make the windows first, then to get them here, and then to get them replaced, especially the ones that are so high up. This could be a process. So downtown could look boarded up for a couple of months, Paul.
Yeah, it's been really interesting the last week or so, just kind of like driving and looking at the skyline and like keep trying to look for the pieces of plywood on all the windows. Yeah, my thought on that is I'll give Mayor John Whitmire the number for my handyman because he got it done in about 12 hours after that thing got blown through. I don't know how long that would take if you extrapolated across 4,000 windows and skyscrapers, but he was pretty quick.
Okay, my next story, ABC 13 did an investigation into one of Harris County's longest serving current judges. And this judge is missing. Judge Kelly Johnson has been missing from work since May 1st. She was the judge in all three of A.J. Armstrong's trials. And when asked about it, ABC 13 spoke to some people who were in the courthouse. One described Johnson's manic behavior and said, she's a danger to herself and to the community. A Houston police report from May 4th described Johnson's involvement in an incident near her home. An officer cited a disturbance/CIT, which is an acronym for crisis intervention. And people who work within the court, lawyers and such, they're like, hey, you got to be here at work. We understand personal reasons come up, but nobody knows what's happening outside of people, I'm sure, in the inner circle. But yeah, the judge has been missing for almost a month now.
Yeah, I hope she's okay. It's kind of where I'm left. And then I'm also just left thinking about, we just talked about our crisis intervention program that's on pause. I think there's just a crisis of mental health in America right now. The things that set people off are totally different from person to person. But I'm worried to hear that about that judge.
Okay, Paul, as if there wasn't enough going on in the city, and this comes from Houston Public Media. Guess what? Houston mosquito samples tested positive for West Nile. Oh no, come on. It's bad already in the city. Now, most people infected by the virus do not develop any symptoms, while others develop fever and body aches, and about 1 in 150 people develop a severe illness affecting their central nervous system, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. I'm not going to lie. One of those fears I have, mosquitoes, West Nile, right? Because in the 90s to the early 2000s, there was a big push about West Nile and what it could do. And 1 in 150, by the way, who would develop that central nervous response, those odds are pretty high. Like, I don't want those odds. That's scary.
Yeah, I was born in 1997, so I have this very vivid memory growing up and being like way too young to understand it, but just like knowing West Nile was very scary, and that has taken a lifetime to shake. A short lifetime so far, but I know exactly what you mean. And we have more mosquitoes than usual. Have you been reading that?
Yeah.
Just all this rain that we're getting, and we have like a far higher mosquito population than most years. I was out on a walk yesterday and I just was getting swarmed. So now I'm worried about West Nile. Thanks for that, Raheel.
I got you, Paul. By the way, 2 more stories, okay? A hotel we should all know by now because we're always stuck in traffic by it is shutting down. Hotel Derek is closing after 20 years. The boutique hotel is closing to make way for another brand, but no details have been released. Now, I know they're not just going to shut it down as prime real estate. If you don't know Hotel Derek, or Hotel Derek, as I like to call it, then you must never encounter traffic because it's right there on 610 and Westheimer. You're always stuck in traffic, whether it be on Westheimer or on 610, and everybody sees that logo. But yeah, they're shutting down after 20 years.
Incredible. When did they close? Because I've actually never been or seen this place as somebody who's lived in Houston for 9 months. I feel like I need to get out there as soon as possible.
Yeah, so they're going to be shutting down in June. So that will be your last opportunity to see Hotel Derek.
This is good to know. I'm going to have to plan a little 6 p.m. drive out there so I can just sit in some traffic.
Okay, this final one is for one of our regular contributors, Evan Mintz. I know he is the king of Build the Ike Dike, and he must be smiling a little bit today because the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have sent their first official payment to start the design process and engineering to prepare the project for construction. The $500,000 payment is a drop in the bucket of the overall $34.4 billion project. But here's a little caveat, Paul. This could rise up to $57 billion due to inflation. So it is a start, but we are finally seeing some traction in the Storm Coastal Barrier Project that had received approval in 2022 by Congress, but it's just going to take a long time to develop, and we'll hopefully see it here in our lifetime.
I think just to emphasize how long it's been, I mean, we're talking about the Ike Dike. And what year was Hurricane Ike? That was the first hurricane I remember after moving to South Texas. So it's been a long time ago. The 2008 hurricane, and there have been plenty of other hurricanes in the area since then. So that is just kind of a testament to how long this project is going to take. But, maybe in our lifetimes, fingers crossed.
All right, that was fun. Thank you for letting me do a little rapid fire, Paul. So let's get to your moment of joy. What made you happy this week?
Yeah, well, my moment of joy as this is airing, my girlfriend Peyton is in her first year of med school in Shreveport, is taking her last test of the year, and then she will be moving down here to do some research and live with me for the summer. So I'm really excited about that and proud of her for getting through her first year. I do not know how these med students do it. I love being a journalist. I love only having needed a bachelor's degree and not having to think about math and science most of the time of my life. So complete power to her. I am very proud of her. And then my other moment of joy, this is just something I think about living in the South, like all of us do. I just love our line workers. When I grew up, I was much younger. I used to always stand in our washer in the washing room, and I would say, "I'm a cherry picker man," like those guys that go up in the boxes. And my parents just thought that was so cute. And then as I've gotten older, I'm like, these guys are amazing, because you just realize that, like, from all over the country, just thousands and thousands of these people are flooding communities that they have no connection to, all to make sure our lights come back on as quickly as possible. And we can all complain about Centerpoint as much as we want, and Centerpoint's communication, but I think it is just a real feat that we had 900,000 people lose power, and that has been repaired by people who, for the most part, are not from Houston. I think we all need to take our hats off to them and show them our appreciation, and they give me a lot of joy.
Absolutely, man. Shout out to all the line workers. Amazing, amazing stuff. And thank you to them for coming down here and helping us get back online. And that is awesome. Okay, my moment of joy, I want to send some love to my oldest daughter. She just finished the 3rd grade, and let me just tell you, it was a year. We moved during the school year. She still went to the same school. She had 4 different teachers at one point. And through all of that, she dominated. I'm so proud of her. It was an outstanding year. She completed her GT projects on time. She completed all of her big projects. And it was so cool to see her develop as a little person in this last year, going through a lot of changes. So I'm proud of her. I want to send her some love.
Woo! Congratulations.
Okay, my second one, Bradford Thompson and Brett Whitcomb's documentary on Reading Rainbow is now out on streaming. You can watch Butterfly in the Sky everywhere online now. The 2 Houston directors debuted the film in March, and I've been wanting to watch it since. It's won a lot of awards. I haven't had time, so hopefully this weekend I can fire it up after I finish Dune 2, because I haven't had time to watch that either. But Reading Rainbow played such a big role in my life, Paul, because I immigrated here when I was 5 years old, and we didn't have cable back then, and the only thing we did have was PBS. So I would watch Reading Rainbow all the time. We would also watch it in school, and I know everyone says it instilled a lifelong love of reading from watching that show, but it truly did for me. That love of reading and learning started with Reading Rainbow, and I've always wanted to be on it as well, to review one of the books like many of the kids did. I never got that chance. Obviously, the show is no longer in production, but it is such an important show for a lot of people, and I can't wait to watch this documentary and just cry a little bit, because when that music hits, you just think about your childhood, and just a beautiful show. I can't wait to watch this documentary.
That's amazing. Have you shared Reading Rainbow with your kids too?
I have. Yeah, I make my daughter watch it a lot. My youngest daughter is only 20 months, so she doesn't get it yet, but I will make her watch it as well.
Yeah.
Sadly, Paul, my older daughter said, it's boring.
But you can show her the documentary. That might be more her speed.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. You know what? Reading Rainbow is a great show, but when you've got Bluey, it's tough to compete.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, that was a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for all the insight, and have fun during Memorial Day weekend. Try to stay cool. It's going to be a hot one, and it should be a good one, though.
Yes, sir. I'll see you guys at the pool. Thanks for having me, Raheel.
That was Paul Cobler. All the stories we talked about are linked in our show notes. That will do it for this week here on CityCast Houston. Our producers are Carleon Jones and Joyce Tang. Our newsletter editors are Brooke Lewis and Natalia Aldana. And the host is me, Raheel Ramzanali. Our music is by the band All the Kimonos. We're off Monday for Memorial Day, but we'll be back on Tuesday with a deep dive into HISD Superintendent Mike Miles' first year. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Whew. Man, it is one of those weeks. I had no idea what day it was.